Komets Corner is presented by Lee's Famous Recipe.
I don't think it's one thing. I think we obviously have a lot of good players in here who are gifted offensively, who can put the puck in the net. I don't think it's that. I think we got a lot of guys that care, and maybe just getting that going in the first period rather than the third is probably going to be the biggest key over the next stretch of games.
You can tell in that sigh, there was a little bit of frustration.
A little bit.
In the voice of Jack Dugan after Sunday's games. A rough week, a long week, but still a lot of hockey to play this season. So we have weeks like these.
Absolutely, it's going to happen, and people just don't understand the nuances and what happens to an ECHL roster. The ECHL is such a unique league as far as how the players move up and down. It's not like any other league, not like any other sport. So you get guys called up, obviously, you get guys injured, and you call guys up, and then there's another factor. The Komets have lost 2 players to going back to college. So, there's so much stuff that factors into this, and the Komets were flying high just a week ago. I mean, a week ago, we're talking about winning 7 out of 10, 5 straight at home, and now we've lost 4 straight. And that shows you how quick it can change, The team basically has 5 regulars out of the lineup, and then you lose 2 to injury last weekend. You weren't expecting to lose Brandon McManus and Alex Swetlikoff in the same stretch. And then you throw 2 or 3 new guys in the lineup who, because of the schedule, they have zero practice time. They don't even know the guys on the names of the guys on the team yet. So a lot of it, a lot of this right now, it's going on. It's just a juggling of the roster, and it happens. Really, every team kind of goes through it. It's just a matter of whether you can fight through it. And I'm not really concerned, because if you look at the 4 games we've lost, 3 of them were by 1 goal. And then this game against Toledo, we were in it to the very end. So if you're getting blown out, yeah, maybe that's a concern. But you know what? You're losing by 1 goal. You're fighting. You're out-shooting your opponents. It's just a matter of getting those guys back in the lineup.
You mentioned out-shooting the opponents. That was one of the things I was going to bring up, is in 3 of the 4 games this past week, you outshot them. And you outshot them by double digits. I mean, really outshot them. So is it just a case of maybe getting some, Gary Graham liked to call them greasy goals, getting some of those deflections up front and, playing in the crease a little bit and getting those dirty goals? Yeah,
you know what, we call it puck luck. And the Komets haven't had much of that really all season long, because they run into some really, really hot goaltenders. And I think of a guy like Nolan Volkin, who has just been snake bitten. He's had so many opportunities. I go back to that game in Cincinnati where he broke his stick on an empty net. I've never seen that before in my life. So he's a guy who you'd like to get rolling. And again, it comes down to just knowing your roster and knowing the guys around you. And right now, the Komets just don't have that right now.
Okay, before we get into the game highlights, I got to ask you about the jersey. Tell us about this lovely piece of memorabilia, Shane.
Yeah, going old school here today. This jersey was my white whale for the past 40 years. It's Danny Sancartier's jersey from the 1982-83 season. And my wife tracked this down. My lovely wife tracked this down and got it for me for Christmas. It's probably the only time I'll wear it, because I plan on framing it. But the story goes, in the March of '83, I was 9 years old, and I was watching the Komets warm up near old section 54 near the Komet bench, and I was the only kid there. And Danny Sancartier broke his goal stick during warm-ups, and Wayne Bishop, defenseman on that team, scooped it up, and he just handed it over the glass to me. And that was the night that changed my life. I became a huge Komet fan from that point, because I had a piece of kind of game-used memorabilia, and this was the jersey that Dan Sancartier was wearing that night.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's why this jersey is so special to me, because it was a life-changing event. And I got to tell that story to Wayne Bishop many years later. He actually lives up in Toronto, and when we played in Brampton, he actually came up to see the Komets, and I got to tell him that story. And I tell the guys in our dressing room now, it's like that little gesture to that 9-year-old kid can change his life, as it did mine. So just kind of be aware of that when it comes to dealing with the fans.
How did your wife find it? Now I have way more questions, because to track down the jersey from that night 40 years ago is pretty impressive.
Yeah, you know what? There was someone who had collected jerseys for many, many, many years, and they decided to sell the collection. They posted them online. It was from the 60s to the 90s, and this little gem just happened to be in the box.
Oh, wow.
And now it's finally home with me.
And will go on the wall very shortly.
Absolutely.
Very shortly. Well, that's way cooler than what we're about to do.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at the highlights from Tuesday night. I mean, New Year's Eve, always a cool time to watch the Komets play, and you guys got to take on the Bloomington Bison. Welcome an expansion team here, and a tough night, the 3-2 loss, but a good crowd, and people just excited to be out, be with the family, take them out to a Komets game, and really enjoy the Coliseum and what the Komets have to offer, and really all the history gets celebrated between, for you, as you know, between family members and getting a chance to come back for the holidays. Yeah,
no, New Year's Eve is a special night. I've spent, I think, the last 41 New Year's Eves at the Coliseum, so it is a lot of people. That's the only game they go to is New Year's Eve, and back it was one of those games where it really used to be kind of a guaranteed win night for many, many years, but the Komets have struggled over the past 3 years on New Year's Eve. But it goes back. This team just does not want to disappoint in front of the home crowd. And unfortunately, they sometimes play a little bit tight. But Brett Brochu had a great game. His shutout streak, I think, was snapped at about 108 minutes. Even though the Komets have lost 4 straight, goaltending has not been the issue. And Brett Brochu had another solid outing last night.
And you take a look at Odin Tufto. He would get his 8th goal of the season. Alex Svetlikov gets his 6th. What does Svetlikov bring to the table? Because he just seems like such a talented offensive player that when he's here, he's just absolutely destructive.
Yeah, he's a strong power forward with something the Komets really haven't had a whole lot of the last few years. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Garrett Thompson. Ethan Keppen is the same way. So, the Komets lose Ethan Keppen, they get Alex Svetlikov back. So it was a bit of a wash. So you kind of think, hey, if we had both of those guys, what this team could do. But Svetlikov is a tremendous talent. He's fighting through some injuries right now. Obviously missed 3 straight games, but hopefully we get him back for this long trip going out west.
And we mentioned this earlier in the show, but Fort Wayne outshoots the Bison 48-26. Is that a point that is stressed, like take as many shots as you can, or is that just part of the way that the game plays out? Like, is that something consciously they go into the game thinking, and Jesse and Olivier and Corey really have in their minds to do intentionally as the game begins?
Well, you can't score if you don't shoot,
True.
So that's,
true.
when all else fails, put the puck on the net and good things will happen.
You miss every shot you don't take.
That's right.
Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
But no, I mean, you put the pucks to the net, hopefully you get that greasy goal, you get those rebounds, and but we've just run into some really good goaltending. I mean, across the league, the goaltending is pretty good. So sometimes you just got to tip your cap to the goaltender, and that's what we had to do the past couple of games.
We mentioned how special New Year's Eve is. What are your favorite nights of the season? Is it the Thanksgiving Day game, which is now the Bob Chase Classic? Is it New Year's Eve? Is it the first game of the season? Like, what, as an announcer, do you enjoy the most calling?
Every game.
Every win?
Every game is important to me because I still can't believe I get to do what I get to do. The kid who wanted this jersey, 41 years ago, is doing what the 9-year-old Shane is freaking out that he's wearing this jersey right now. So every game is that for me. But no, opening night is special because that's actually every holiday wrapped into one. That's a holiday for me. But I love the first game of the playoffs. That's because the weather's changing, it's a little bit warmer, and when it feels like playoff weather, it's great because the time changes. In the last game of the regular season, I also like that one. The last regular season home game, you finally leave the building and there's still sunlight out, so it feels like the awakening, and now you've got the playoffs. Right. So now that first game of the playoffs, I always enjoy.
Let's talk about Friday because Toledo comes here. We obviously know the rivalry between these two franchises, and let's take a look at some of the highlights. It ended up being a 4-3 Toledo lead, but really a good start to this game. A great first period. You're talking about Jack Dugan scoring on the power play for his 8th goal of the year, and then Petey gets one of his 2 to start off the game with a 2-zip Komets lead. When you take a look at I don't want to say game means more against Toledo, but man, do you really want to beat these Walleyes?
No, they do. They do. They mean a lot more. Not only is a 4-point swing actually when you lose to them, it kind of feels like an 8-point swing, you know. No, you had a 2-goal lead. You got up early. You know, Toledo did something very un-Walleye-like and took 2 penalties right away to give the Komets a 2-man advantage. Komets up 2-0, and you know the dreaded 2-goal lead. I say it all the time on the air. I hate the 2-goal lead because it's right there. You feel comfortable, but you're not comfortable at all. You give up one more. Now it's a 1-goal game. So. That's been kind of a trend. You know, a couple of games. I know a game against Wheeling, Komets were up 2-0, I think twice in the game, or up by 2, and then they blew a 2-goal lead against Florida. So it came back and bit us again on Friday night. But again, you know, the Komets were shorthanded. They fought to the very end, and it turned out to be just a 1-goal difference in the hockey game. And
the Komets again coming off 48 shots Tuesday night. Friday, they fire 47 shots against Toledo to Toledo's 32. So, again, when you take a look at the play at the goaltending, Connor Unger had been playing very well, 28 of 32 saves in this one. When Brochu's your number 1 and Connor Unger's number 2, and they've been playing like they've played the last couple of weeks, really the last month of the season, how much confidence does this give that team, knowing that the guys behind them are ECHL Goaltender of the Week candidates week in and week out? 2 of the last 3 we've seen.
Yeah, I think it's actually frustrating to the guys because they know, hey, we got to score some more goals for our goaltenders.
Really?
Because I mean, they're
what's the pressure on them?
Yeah, I mean, they're working. You know, they're working. So I don't think it's so much. Oh, hey, these guys are on the back end are going to handle things. It's like, no, we got to score some more goals. We got to give our goaltenders more goal support, and that was a problem last year because if you look at the goal support our goaltenders were getting, you know, it wasn't great. So we've kind of fallen back into that hole a little bit, but. Again, what impressed me most this week, you know, the first 2 losses of the week, it didn't really feel like we were shorthanded. But we go into Toledo, and that was the first night. You could tell that the guys, man, we're shorthanded. These guys are gassed. You know, you even got guys who, just because we are shorthanded, you know, they're playing through some injuries. There's probably a couple guys on that team that probably could use a couple nights off, but they just can't take it. So that just goes back to, you know, the ECHL is such a unique league because it's such a grind, and you play so many games on top of each other. And everyone, you know, this dressing room is a very tight dressing room. So I don't think this is just a bump in the road. And when we got on the bus Saturday, you know, it wasn't like, oh, we lost. They were mad. Guys were physically upset. So I love seeing that passion just getting onto the bus.
Yeah, you love to see that they care.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at some of those highlights from Saturday night in Toledo, a 3-zip loss at the Walleye. This is the only game of last week where the Komets actually got outshot, 36-26. Brett Brochu, 33 of 36 in goal, and our old friend Brandon Hawkins getting one of those 3 goals. What's the relationship like when a guy like Brandon Hawkins played here, won a championship here, and I know it was a very unique season in the COVID era, but then goes somewhere else? Like, because of the roster turnover, there aren't a lot of guys still left that Hawkins played with. PD, of course, being one of them. But what's that dynamic like with some of those guys that we cheered very hard for one season that are now playing elsewhere?
No, we have a special bond. That team, everyone on that team has still got a very close bond. I know there's text threads between all the guys who are on that team, and you know, Brandon Hawkins he's just a beautiful human being. You know, he's one of the best guys you ever want to meet. And you know, it was a situation where he had signed in Toledo prior to the COVID year, and the only reason he did is because his best friend had signed with Toledo. That was the only reason. And because of the rules coming out of COVID, you had to go back to the team that you had signed with from the previous year. So, you know, he didn't know much about Fort Wayne. You know, he certainly loved his time in Fort Wayne, but you know, unfortunately, he had to go to Toledo, and now he's back to being a frenemy, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, I miss him because he grew up like a mile from where my grandma in the suburbs of Detroit. So we used to have fun discussions at practice, and you know, all the Detroiter type stuff that people like to talk about. So family ties, Brandon Hawkins, we miss him. And we liked him to have success, but not success against the Komets. Then let's talk about Sunday. Turning around, trying to salvage the weekend. A tough game against Cincinnati and a 3-2 loss. Cincinnati, for some reason, I don't know what it is, and this may have been just tired and shorthanded, they've got the Komets number a little bit this season. What's the dynamic there?
Well, this was a team that they did not get off to a good start. I mean, they still at the bottom of the standings, but they cleaned house. They moved a lot of players. It was a team that Cincinnati's got a lot of talent. They just have not been able to kind of put it together as a team, and now they're starting to. So even though we're only in January, I think the playoffs are probably even out of reach already for Cincinnati.
Wow.
So this is a team you don't want to play down the stretch. 3-2 against these guys. The 2 games we lost against them, unfortunately, right here at the Coliseum. So. I mean, this is a team that's putting it together. We're going to see them, of course, a few more times here in the second half of the season. So, they're going to be a tough out, just to say it simply.
Teams with nothing to lose are sometimes the most difficult to play. Talk about Mr. Brad Morrison, a familiar friend, back in the building, and didn't take him too long to make an impact. What does he bring to the table, and what have you seen from him?
Yeah, Brad Morrison, he's a character. He played with the Komets back in 2019, 2020. And for him he met us in Toledo. He flew in from British Columbia, met us in Toledo, got on the bus, and we took him back to Fort Wayne. And for him to be able to suit up, and actually his gear didn't arrive, so it was mismatched gear.
Oh, wow.
His skates, gloves, sticks, everything. And for him to go out there and score a goal on his very first shift, first shot as a Komet, it was fantastic. And he's a guy who's got a lot of experience. He's been in this league. He's been up in the AHL. He is tremendously skilled. He's got some of the best hands you're ever going to see at this level. So I'm excited to see, hopefully Brad Morrison is going to be able to stick around here for a minute, maybe for the whole season, and, put him with a guy like Jack Gorniak. This could be one of the speedier lines in the league.
Jack the Flash. Let's take a look at some of the standings for the ECHL right now. You take a look at the Toledo Walleye, they're number 1. Last time I did this, I didn't update it. It didn't save. So I'm really keeping my eyes open to make sure, these are the correct standings. Fort Wayne, as you see right there, 3rd behind Iowa and Toledo, and the Indy Fuel 4th if the playoffs started today. Those would be your 4 teams. But Bloomington's actually faring fairly well for an expansion team. I mean, we saw when Iowa came in, it was pretty rough for a while, but it looks like Bloomington's playing pretty well. And then, as you mentioned, the Cyclones, while they are last, they have been a little bit of a bugaboo for the Komets and don't have anything to lose, so hey, why not throw it all out the window? They're
going to be a team that's going to be hard to beat. You look at the division now from top to bottom now is one of the toughest in the league, if not the toughest, because every night is going to be a battle. You saw what we had to deal with Indy, the last weekend. It's just, those were playoff games, those 2 games against Indy and Bloomington. They're a frustrating team to play. And they're a really good defensive team. They're a team that's probably going to get better as well. We still got Kalamazoo that gives us fits. So it's going to be a fun second half of the season. But now you're going to get a little bit of a respite. You're going to go on the road. You're going to take on 3 teams outside of your division. And I think that's kind of just what the doctor ordered, because sometimes when you're in a slump, getting out of town is the best medicine.
Let's take a look at this week's upcoming schedule. You mentioned after 7 games in 10 days. Now you get to go down to Tulsa for 2 and then finish up the weekend at Wichita. So a big road trip coming up. And I was kind of looking at Tulsa and Wichita stats before here. Pretty good teams. I mean, you're talking about teams that are 3rd and 4th when it comes to the Mountain Division.
Yeah, but also you have to take into consideration their division. Who are they playing? So sometimes when I see a division leader with kind of inflated numbers, it's like, especially out in the mountain when you've got Rapid City and Allen and Utah that have all struggled. I think they might be still at single-digit win totals. So it's like, who are they playing? So you really can't get a good measurement of where they are at until you actually get on the ice with them.
Okay, before we wrap up this show, I want to get your thoughts on this road trip and what the Komets need to do to kind of flip the script on the road. As we've talked about many times before, sometimes that road trip galvanizes a team where all they have to do is focus on hockey, not any of the other stuff you have going on in a home game. Do you think that could be the case this week, where they really get to put it all together and put this past week behind them and just play hockey and do the best that they can on the road?
Yeah, I think, just getting some rest. You're not going to have a game until Friday night, and now you're actually going to you're going to practice at the Coliseum before we head out to Tulsa. You're going to get a full practice in Tulsa. So just the fact that you're going to have a couple of practice sessions to get some of these new guys acclimated is also going to be a big help. And, I think Alex Switlikoff should be on schedule to come back. I think Brandon McManus also could be back in the lineup. So it's going to be an insanely different lineup when we come back on the ice on Tulsa. And that's what I kind of preach to fans. It's just patience. I mean, like I said earlier in the show, I mean, we were on a high, 2 weeks ago, actually a week ago, we could do no wrong. And then all of a sudden things happen and you're back in the tank again. But that's how quickly it can turn right around. And a 4-game losing streak, well, we can go on the road and we can win 3 straight and come back home all happy again.
Well, we sure hope it does. We sure hope that is the case this week. If it isn't, we're going to have you have another historical jersey to come in so that we can talk more about that. But for this week, he's Shane Albarani, I'm Glenn Marini, and that is Komets Corner.
Komets Corner is presented by Lee's Famous Recipe.